The choking sound on the phone rang out, a little girl's voice trembling, fragile as if about to disappear. "Mommy, I've been stabbed." It was Mile Harris, only 11 years old, calling her mother from her home in Berkeley, Missouri, as blood stained her nightgown. On the other end of the line, the desperate mother only had time to scream her daughter's name before her voice fell silent. But when she called back, the person who answered was no longer her little girl, but a man's voice, panting. When asked where Mile was, he coldly replied, "She's sleeping." That person was Laurentio Kane, Moshi Mlaud's son and Mile's uncle. That night, when the police arrived, they found a horrifying scene. Blood all over the living room, 3 knives lying around, and inside the house were 2 lifeless bodies. Moshi Mlaud, 53, and her 11-year-old niece. Outside, the perpetrator of the tragedy was pacing silently, his clothes soaked in blood, his eyes empty. But this story does not begin there. It begins with love, with music, and with a cry for help that was missed. Moshi Mlaud was born and raised in Seattle, where she was known as the voice of the neighborhood. She sang not only at church services or small events, but also in the kitchen while cooking, on a park bench while chatting with friends, and to soothe her saddest days. Music was more than just a passion. It was her way of life, her way of connecting with others. Those who heard Moshi sing said that her voice was both warm and healing, as if each melody was a hug to an invisible wound. That's why her friends often called her Seattle's Sadie, the woman whose voice could make a room fall silent to listen. However, music was only a part of her life. More importantly, Moshi was a mother and a grandmother. She had 3 sons, and especially a little granddaughter, Mile Harris, whom she considered her whole world. Mile is an energetic, cheerful, and surprisingly intelligent 11-year-old girl. She loves candy, colorful piñatas, and giggling at silly pranks. But what she loves most is singing with her grandmother. The 2 of them often make small videos, singing songs that just by listening to them, the love spreads throughout the house. "Do I love you?" Moshi asks. "Yes," Mile answers immediately, her voice filled with happiness. In 2023, Moshi moved Mile and her son Laurentio Kane out of Seattle to Berkeley, Missouri. For Moshi, it was a chance to start over, to be closer to her family and hopefully build a more stable future for her granddaughter. 3 generations living under one small roof seemed like a promising new beginning. But behind the smiling family photos was a different reality. Laurentio, 28, had struggled with mental illness for many years. He had been arrested several times in Seattle for violent acts, from assault to robbery. But for Moshi, maternal love made her unable to let go. She still opened her arms, gave him a place to stay, gave him a chance to start over, believing that love could heal the cracks. To the outside world, Laurentio often expressed his deep affection for his mother. In his social media statuses, he called her his heart, his only light. He once wrote, "You are the reason I keep trying. Without you, I have nothing." Those words made everyone believe that the love between them was unshakable. But that love seemed to hide a blind dependence, a hidden storm waiting to explode. When Moshi moved to Missouri, the neighbors saw a cozy family. She often sat on the porch, chatting with the neighbors, her voice gentle and her smile always present. Mile ran around the yard, happy, never without laughter. But there were days when the atmosphere in the house became heavy. The arguing, the times when Laurentio lost control, the anxious looks in Moshi's eyes as he tried to hide his fear. And then, a week before the tragedy, Moshi decided to do what few mothers would do. She walked into the Berkeley police station. She reported that her son was threatening her and Mile. Her voice was shaking, her eyes pleading for some kind of protection. The police took notes, explained the procedure for a protective order, but no emergency measures were taken. No one followed, no one checked. And perhaps it was the motherly love that made Moshi hesitate, not completing the legal procedures. She probably still hoped that things would calm down, that her son would calm down. Either way, it was the last chance. The Missed Chance. June 15th, 2024. A normal summer afternoon in Berkeley turned into a nightmare. At 4:45 p.m., the phone in Seattle rang. It was Miles' last call. In a brief moment, an 11-year-old child told the terrifying truth. He had been stabbed by his own uncle. The mother in Seattle immediately called back, her heart pounding with fear. But it was Laurentio who answered. He did not scream. He did not get angry. Just a calm, chilling sentence. He's sleeping. When the police arrived, they witnessed a scene no one could forget. Laurentio stood on the porch, his clothes covered in blood, his hands covered in wounds, his eyes glazed over. Inside the house, Moshi lay motionless on the living room floor, while Maëlle, the little girl who had giggled in videos singing with her grandmother, lay motionless in the bedroom. 3 knives were found, all covered in blood. Neighbors described seeing the pale faces of emergency workers as they emerged from the house. One said, trembling, "It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. Why would a child call to report a stabbing instead of being protected? Why would a mother call for help and no one would listen?" That question haunts not only the family but the entire Berkeley community, and perhaps it will haunt you as you read the rest of this story. There are many more details behind this incident that will leave you speechless. If you find this story worthy of hearing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next part. Death, they say, is just a moment, and the real tragedy lies in the days and months before it, when people see the seeds of tragedy and fail to stop it. And for Moshi Mlaud and his young granddaughter Maëlle, the tragedy was long in coming, but no one was strong enough or determined enough to stop it. For years, Laurentio Kane lived with his mother, protected by her, despite his troubled past. In Seattle, his criminal record was thick with charges: assault, robbery, even weapons possession. But each time he was released from prison, he returned home, and Moshi opened her arms, believing that her son could change. "He's my son," she once confided to a friend, "and I can't abandon him." That love was both a strength and a bond. It made her patiently endure the occasional tantrums, the days when Laurentio would lose control, smash things, or sit silently for hours with a dark look in his eyes. It made her accept the uncertainty in her own home, hoping that motherly love would calm the storm. But the neighbors were not blind. They had heard the arguing, had seen Moshi sighing on the porch, her eyes anxious as she peered inside. Some whispered that Moshi was too kind, too trusting, and that one day her patience would pay off. What haunted everyone was that just 6 days before she was murdered, Moshi had walked into the police station. She was clear. Her son had threatened to harm her and her granddaughter. It was not a vague fear, but a direct warning. The police listened, then instructed her on how to get a protective order. But they did not issue an emergency order, did not conduct a home inspection, and did not intervene immediately. Perhaps when Moshi walked out of the police station, she breathed a sigh of relief because at least she had spoken up. Perhaps she thought that the mere fact that she dared to report to the police was enough to make Laurentio wary. But the reality was different. Nothing had changed. And it was the silence that followed that became a death sentence for both grandmother and grandchild. For Maëlle, she was still carefree, as if no shadow had ever covered her life. She had no idea that in just a few days the very uncle who had held her in family photos would become a demon. She still went to school, still sang, still laughed loudly. In the most recent video, she coaxed her grandmother, "Say I love you. I love you too." Those images were later shared all over social media, making anyone who saw them choke up. Meanwhile, Laurentio sank deeper and deeper into instability. Old friends said he had posted contradictory statuses, sometimes praising his mother as a goddess, sometimes hinting at betrayal and hatred. People could not understand when his mind was real and when it was an illusion. June 15th, 2024, that fateful day, started out as normal as any other. Neighbours saw Moshi going out in the morning, laughing and waving. No one expected that later that afternoon her house would turn into a cold-blooded crime scene. At around 4:45 p.m., Miel called his biological mother in Seattle. Her small, panicked voice told him that he had been stabbed. The mother, hundreds of miles away, could do nothing but scream, desperately begging her son not to leave. When she called back, hoping that someone would save him, Laurentio's voice rang out, hoarse, eerily calm. "He's sleeping." When the police arrived, they found him staggering in the yard, his clothes covered in blood. He did not run away, did not resist, just silently paced back and forth like a ghost. And when the paramedics entered the house, what they saw haunted them for the rest of their lives. Moshi lying motionless in the living room, his body covered in knife wounds. And Maëlle, the 11-year-old girl, was found in her bedroom, also stabbed multiple times, her eyes still open, as if she had not yet understood why her uncle had done this. 3 knives were found near the body, each covered in blood. All that remained was a deathly silence, a stark contrast to the house that had once been filled with music and laughter. The news quickly spread throughout the neighborhood, and then the city of Berkeley. Neighbor Carla, who had spent hours sitting on the porch with Moshi, burst into tears when she heard the news. She had a beautiful voice, a real beautiful voice. "Now gone," another said, trembling. "A child? To kill a child, you must be really evil." As the community was shocked, police arrested Laurentio and charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder, but the public's anger was directed not just at him, but at the system that had failed. Why didn't the police intervene after Moshi's plea for help? Why did a mother raise the alarm but no one did anything? In Seattle, where Moshi lived, friends and family gathered in the park, lit candles, and sang hymns through tears. They hugged, cried, and recalled fond memories. "If the police had done their job, she would still be singing to us," one friend choked out. The story of Moshi and Miel is more than a murder. It is a warning about maternal love, about the inability of a civil protection system, and about how love can sometimes become dangerous shackles. But that's not all. After Laurentio was arrested, the police discovered even darker secrets that showed the demon lurking in the shadows was more terrible than anyone could have imagined. Are you ready to hear that part? Because what is about to be revealed will shock you even more than the crime that happened in that house. And if you don't want to miss it, subscribe to the channel now, because the next part will expose the darkest side of Laurentio Kane's life. A case may end at the scene, but the aftermath does not. When Laurentio Kane was arrested, Berkeley residents thought it was clear a disturbed man killed his mother and niece. But the police didn't stop there. As they investigated, they began to piece together a much darker picture. A picture of a man with a history of violence, loneliness, and a past that no one dared to dig into. Laurentio was no stranger to law enforcement. Seattle records showed he had been arrested multiple times for assault, robbery, and menacing. Once he got into a fight over a careless joke. Another time, he threatened a man in a bar with a knife. The police, the courts, and even the jail had records of Laurentio Kane. But strangely, he always came back. To those around him, he was like a time bomb. His old friend told the press he was always very gentle, talking normally. But just a little thing and he became a different person. His eyes darkened, his voice changed. It was like there were 2 people in one body. People began to ask, was Laurentio mentally ill? Or was he simply a violent man who took advantage of his mother's forgiveness to continue living as a ghost in the family? The answer was never clear, but the consequences were evident in blood. Meanwhile, the community erupted in anger. Many people marched in front of the city hall, holding banners reading, "Justice for Moshi and Maëlle." They asked, why didn't the police respond when Moshi called for help? A local newspaper wrote, "We had the chance to prevent the tragedy, but we missed it." What made the pain even more haunting was the legacy Moshi left behind. She was more than just a mother and a grandmother, she was an artist. Online, friends shared old videos of Moshi singing soulfully at church services. Her voice, once uplifting, now only resonates through recorded footage. In one video, she smiles brightly, holds a guitar, and sings a soulful gospel tune. Beside her, Mael dances to the beat, his eyes sparkling with joy. Viewers can't help but imagine just a few months ago they were so happy. And then it was all erased in one afternoon. After his arrest, Laurentio remained silent in the interrogation room. The police tried to elicit his words, but he wouldn't reveal his reasons, didn't show any remorse. Occasionally he stared at the wall, muttering nonsense. One officer said he seemed insane, but others say he was sane beyond belief, simply unconcerned with the deaths of his mother and niece. The Alameda County District Court immediately indicted Laurentio on 2 counts of first-degree murder. If convicted, he faces life in prison without parole. His defense attorney hinted at the possibility of insanity, but that did little to quell the anger in the community. In Seattle, friends and family held a large memorial service. Hundreds gathered, lit candles, and sang songs Moshi had performed. One friend stood up, her voice choking with emotion. She told me that music could save people, but she wasn't saved. It's so unfair. For Mael, the loss was even more painful. She was only 11 years old, just starting a long journey ahead. She loved to draw, sing with her grandmother, and often wrote notes that said, "I love you, Grandma." But now all that is left is a memory lying dormant in a toy box that police seized from the bedroom. The once peaceful Berkeley community is now facing a spectre that even in the safest of homes, evil can creep in. "We always thought this was a safe neighborhood," said one neighbor, "but now no one is sure." Meanwhile, thousands of comments have flooded social media, some praying for the souls of Moshi and Mael, some calling for severe punishment for Laurentio, others questioning police accountability. Some activists have even spoken out, calling for reform of the system that handles cases of domestic violence and mental illness. The case is not just a personal tragedy, but also a symbol of the flaws in modern American society. When a mother has the courage to call for help, why is the system silent? When neighbors have repeatedly raised the alarm, why is no one taking action? And when an innocent child is murdered, do we still have the right to say, "We did our best"? That question haunts everyone, from Moshi's friends to strangers who read the news. And for Laurentio, he didn't just kill his mother and niece, he killed the faith of an entire community. But the story doesn't end there. As the case prepares for trial, another shocking detail suddenly comes to light. Laurentio had been leaving dark signs on social media, threatening, writing darkly. If only someone had noticed, if only someone had acted sooner, maybe things would have been different. In the next part, we'll delve into those signs, the missed warnings, and how we, as a society, failed to see the storm coming. There was one thing that made the community even more outraged. All the dangerous signs about Laurentio Kane had been obvious, but no one really stopped to look. On social media platforms, people began to dig through his old status lines and posts, and then a horrifying picture emerged. Dark sentences, words implying hatred and resentment towards his family. He even wrote once, "Don't dare stop me, not even my own blood." At first, these lines were only skimmed by a few old friends. They thought it was just an impulse, a familiar way to de-stress online. But after the deaths of Moshi and Mael, each word became haunting, like a prophecy of tragedy. A friend once texted Laurentio, asking why he wrote such strange things. He simply replied, "That's the truth in my head. You'll understand." The friend later cried in an interview, "I should have told someone, but at the time I thought he was just talking nonsense." Now, police confirmed that they also found several strange notes on Laurentio's phone. One of them read, "Blood will pay blood. No one will escape punishment. These sentences made the investigator shudder. They were not the product of a fit of anger, but thoughts that were nurtured, written down, and saved. That raises the question. This case was not simply an act of losing control. It had the appearance of a plan, a long-term incubation. And the cruelest thing was that the targets were the very people who had once opened their arms to him. During the investigation, many neighbors also revealed that they had heard fierce arguments coming from the apartment. I heard a banging sound once, and then a woman's voice shouted, "Don't, Laurentio!" But then it stopped. I was about to call the police, but then I thought maybe it was just a family matter. "Now I can't forgive myself," said a woman who lives downstairs. These accounts, bit by bit, paint a clear picture. The warning was there, the distress signal was sounded, but we, as individuals and as a society, ignored it. On local television, psychologists analyzed that Laurentio may have had antisocial personality disorder. People with this disorder often lack empathy, lack remorse, and are prone to violent outbursts. In many cases, the signs appear in childhood, violence against animals, fighting at school, said one expert. But when they grow up, if there is no intervention, the consequences can be tragic like this. This has sparked a heated debate. How should we monitor, support, and manage people with a history of violence and mental illness? Should there be a community alert system when someone repeatedly threatens or attacks a loved one? One journalist wrote, "We often say after each massacre it could have been prevented, but when will we really prevent it?" While public opinion is boiling in a small corner, the remaining families of Moshe and Mael are still immersed in pain. Moshe's sister sobbed at the funeral. She cried for help. She just wanted to protect her children, but no one listened. The funeral was held to the sound of hymns, with hundreds of people attending. Everyone wore white, holding candles. When Mael's small coffin was carried into the church, many people burst into tears. "We lost a voice, a little angel," said a priest at the ceremony. "But we also lost the peace of our own home." In the courtroom, Laurentio appeared with a cold face. He wore an orange prison uniform. His hands were cuffed. When the judge read the indictment, he only smiled slightly, as if the whole thing had nothing to do with him. That attitude further angered the community. One person attending the trial said, "He has no remorse at all. He is a devil in human form." The defense attorneys began preparing their case, arguing that their client was mentally ill and not capable of taking full criminal responsibility. But the prosecution insisted. This was a deliberate, premeditated, and unforgivable act. While the court has yet to reach a final verdict, public opinion has formed two opposing views. One side believes that Laurentio is truly sick and should be confined to a mental hospital for life. The other side calls for the harshest sentence because there is no reason to justify the murder of his own mother and a child. The case has gradually become a black mirror, reflecting the contradictions in American society. Individual freedom versus public safety, the right to mental health treatment versus the need for justice for the victim. But for those who have lost loved ones, all these arguments are meaningless. At night, the apartment where the tragedy occurred is still dark, the windows tightly closed. Neighbors passing by still bow their heads. No one dares to look for long. A wound that is not easy to heal. In Seattle, Moshe's friends set up a fund in her name to support victims of domestic violence. "If the system doesn't protect us, we have to stand up for each other," they said. The fund, in just 1 week, has raised tens of thousands of dollars, proving that despite loss, love and kindness still exist. But Laurentio Kane's story is not over. Behind him, there are many questions. How could a man who had committed multiple crimes live free for so long? Why did his public threats go unnoticed online? And, most importantly, are there other Laurentios out there quietly waiting to explode? In the final part, we will follow the trial of Laurentio Kane, the community's reaction, and the painful but powerful legacy that Moshe and Mael left in this world. The Laurentio Kane trial quickly became the center of national attention. Major television stations continuously reported on it. Every detail was analyzed and dissected. People not only wanted to know the verdict, but also wanted to find an answer to a burning question. How could such a tragedy happen? On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed. Reporters jostled each other, cameras flashed continuously. The victims' families sat in the front row, holding tightly to the portraits of Moshi and Mael. The atmosphere was so thick and heavy that everyone could feel it. The prosecutor stood up, his voice loud. The defendant not only killed a woman, not only took the life of a child, but also destroyed an entire family and spread fear in the community. This was not an impulsive act, but preparation, choice, and cold cruelty. Meanwhile, the defense attorney still tried to protect his client. They cited medical records, claiming that Laurentio suffered from a severe mental disorder, that he could not fully control his actions. They wanted the court to consider sending him to a mental hospital instead of the death penalty or life in prison. However, when it was Laurentio's turn to speak, all hopes of the defense almost collapsed. In court, he showed no remorse. On the contrary, he looked straight into the camera lens, smiled faintly. They deserved to die. I just did what I had to do. If I could do it again, I would not change anything. Those words were like a knife, piercing deep into the hearts of those who lost their loved ones. The courtroom fell silent for a few seconds, then cries and screams rang out. A woman screamed, "The devil! He is the devil!" Security personnel had to intervene immediately to maintain order. Finally, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Laurentio Kane will spend the rest of his life behind bars, never to be seen again. The sentence was considered fair by many, but some argued that life imprisonment was not enough of a deterrent for such a cold-blooded man. The debate continues, but at least justice has been served. However, justice cannot erase the pain. After the trial, Moshi's sister tearfully shared, "We lost two wonderful people. No sentence can bring them back. But I hope society learns something so that tragedies like this do not happen again." The deaths of Moshi and Mael have become a powerful wake-up call. In Seattle and many other cities, forums and seminars on domestic violence and mental health have been held. Many organizations have called for the establishment of emergency reporting channels where victims can seek help if they feel threatened. Some lawmakers have even introduced new legislation that would require closer scrutiny of individuals with a history of violence. Moshi's friends continue to maintain a charity in her name. They fund music lessons for disadvantaged children, a way to keep Moshi and Mael's voices alive. At a fundraising performance, a group of school children sang a song Moshi had recorded with her niece. The audience burst into tears, many whispering, "They're still here, through this music." Laurentio Kane's story has faded from the media, but it has never faded from the public memory. It is cited as a prime example of the dangers of ignoring warning signs. And perhaps most haunting is the thought that if a friend, a neighbor, or an authority had listened and acted sooner, Moshi and Mael might still be alive. In the darkness of tragedy, there is still a glimmer of solidarity and love. People remember Moshi as a brave woman who dared to stand up to protect her family. They remember Mael as a little angel, her innocent smile still intact. But at the same time, this story also reminds us domestic violence is not just a private matter. It is a warning bell that the whole society must listen to together. Perhaps that is the final legacy that Moshi and Mael leave behind, a bitter but necessary lesson so that other lives can be saved.